Welcome to the Daily Memphian Commercial Real Estate Seminar that we are, of course, doing virtually this year. Many of you who are probably watching have come to our events that we normally do at the Brooks Museum, get 200, 250 people in there, talk about commercial real estate, go through a number of presentations. Of course, that's not doable right now, especially. But we do have a number of speakers today talking about all the various sectors of commercial real estate. They'll be talking about retail, office space, multifamily, some of the bigger projects in town, including fairgrounds, distribution, industrial, all the various aspects. And we do appreciate you being here. You can post questions that I will try very hard to get to the various speakers today. Two ways you can do that. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a chat window, kind of, at least on my screen, it's over on the right, but in the chat window, just post a question there and I'll get it to one of the speakers eventually. Or if you're watching this video on the site, just click on the link to go to the article in which this video is embedded. At the bottom of that page, there's a comment section, and you can post your comments, your questions there. You can also post comments there, and I'll share some of those potentially. You do have to be a paid subscriber to post in the comment section, but if you're not, you should be. But I'll give you a little secret. You can go over to YouTube, and you can post questions in the chat. We do hope that you do subscribe to the Daily Memphian. We've come up, let's see here, a little over 2 years we've been around, covering business, politics, all arts, culture, neighborhoods, schools, education, and of course COVID. So, and much more than that. Again, thank you for being here. We will get started in just a couple minutes. And again, we'll do questions kind of throughout the various presentations and then a Q&A at the end. But first, I want to introduce a quick message from one of our sponsors today, Evans Peachtree, and please take a look at this.
Evans Peachtree is a full-service law firm founded in 1907 and located in Memphis, Tennessee. We represent a diverse roster of local, national, and international clientele. Our 43 attorneys here at Evans Peachtree offer counsel in a wide variety of practice areas, including real estate, property tax, banking, corporate, construction, employment law, tax planning, and wills and estates. We are proud to be the legal sponsor of this event and welcome you to visit our website at evanspeachtree.com.
Again, thanks to our sponsors today, including Evans Peachtree. I want to get to our first speaker today. We had hoped to have Daryl Cobbins here from Universal Commercial, is working on the Liberty Park project. He had an unavoidable thing come up and understandably couldn't be here today. But we are very pleased to have two people involved with Liberty Park. Again, I think of it as the fairgrounds and the redevelopment there, the sports complex, the retail, all those kinds of things that they'll talk about today. First up is Patrick Riley from CBRE. Patrick, thank you so much for being here and filling in on short notice. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eric, and thanks to all the sponsors for putting this together. As Eric said, I'm Patrick Riley. I'm with CBRE. I've been with CB for 21 years. I primarily focus on office leasing and brokerage. I've partnered with Daryl Cobbins and Brandon Ingram at Universal Commercial, and we've been focused primarily on the office component at Liberty Park. I'm going to share my screen so you can see. And there we go. So what is Liberty Park? Well, Liberty Park is the former fairgrounds. It's been rebranded as Liberty Park. It is and is going to be a dynamic, activated development that will bring together locals and tourists alike and will include a public plaza, a park, family entertainment center, office space, retail and dining, 2 hotels and apartments, and it'll be central to everything. This is, if everybody can see this is kind of the site plan of Liberty Park. So just to kind of get you oriented, you've got Central Avenue here on the north, you've got Southern Avenue here, you've got the Liberty Bowl, you've got CBU, you've got the Sports and Entertainment Center, you've got Tiger Lane here, and then this is an 18-acre site where we're doing the private development area. Liberty Park is already a central hub for existing civic assets, including the Liberty Bowl Memorial Stadium, Tiger Lane, education facilities like CBU and the Maxine Smith STEAM Academy, the Kroc Center, the Children's Museum, and then the new Sports and Events Center. These will create a critical mass there at Liberty Park, and the new mixed-use private development piece will only enhance and complement these existing assets. So kind of drilling in on this kind of 18-acre site, you'll have roughly 100 to 150 apartments. Those are primarily going to be on the upper floors in one of the buildings fronting Central Avenue. You'll have 2 hotels with about 200 rooms, a 90,000 square foot family and entertainment center that Sean will touch on here shortly, along with the 100,000 square foot of retail, and then approximately 90,000 square feet of office space here in this 18-acre development. The apartments, James Macklin with Macklin Enterprises is the development partner there for the multifamily component. And this will give you a little bit of an overview of, this is a site plan for the ground floor uses. You've got the sports and entertainment piece that will be here. This is a multifamily building exclusively. Then you'll have retail here on the ground floors of these buildings. The blue is office on the first floor with some adjacent retail, and this is the upper floors. So you see you've got multifamily here, more office along this main promenade and along Central, and then you've got the 2 hotel pieces that are located right here. The sports and entertainment facility, which is kind of on the south end of Liberty Park, it's going to be roughly 227,000 square feet. You'll have a hard court pavilion that has basketball and volleyball. You'll have an event pavilion with about 2,500 seats for cheerleading, gymnastics, wrestling, all types of indoor activities. And they're estimating that this will generate about 1 million visitors per year. Sean, they told us to keep it to about 3 minutes, so I tried to give a quick overview. Sean's going to delve in more on the retail and the sports, and the family entertainment center. But again, thank you for putting this together, and I'll let you know if there are any questions.
Thank you, Patrick. And I'm going to wait to do any questions to you until I see which parts Sean is talking about. But we're already getting questions on Liberty Park, but let's go ahead and get Sean.
Could you stop sharing, Patrick?
Yes.
So I can share. Trying to get it up.
It is up.
Oh, it is? Okay, it's just not moving forward.
Hey, you're good to go,
okay.
Sean. Thank you.
All right, great. Hey, thank you for an opportunity to be here today. And again, thank to our sponsors and to the Daily Memphian. I'm here to talk about Liberty Park and kind of add on a little bit with Patrick. I'm going to specifically talk a little bit about the retail and the hotel piece. And I'm trying to get it. Is it moving?
No, not yet. Oh, there you go. You're good.
Okay, there it is. Okay, it's just a little slow. I apologize. I'm on phone and okay. At this piece, it should come up in a second. My computer's running behind my phone.
If something didn't go wrong with Zoom, we wouldn't be alive. This is just the era we live in, and we are all sick of it. But no, there's no problem. Just
okay. I'm looking at it's not advancing again. Oh, sorry. I think I get it.
Hey, Sean, let's do this. Let's go
Okay.
ahead and let's talk through the slides. The slide we'll leave
Okay.
the ugly disclaimer up there. Go ahead and just talk through your points, and at some point we maybe come back some of the slides.
The good part, if it comes back, I apologize. The part that I'm involved in and excited about is what we call the private development opportunity at the fairgrounds. That part that includes the retail, 2 hotels, entertainment area. One of the biggest questions I get all the time is there demand for retail at Liberty Park? And we believe it's already there with the existing assets of CBU, Maxine Smith, Cooper Young, Kroc Center, and the Liberty Bowl. This 162-acre campus will be very activated and is already showing demand for retail, irregardless of the sports and youth sports complex, which will only be an enhancement. But another big question that comes up with this thing is Tiger Lane going away? And Tiger Lane is not going away. It's actually going to be enhanced with this retail development. I wish I can get through some of the pictures on that park, but they'll be posted later and get on there. You can see the kind of picture in the back. We want to create a very active retail environment, walkable, that's integrated with the office, with existing assets, with the multifamily uses. I had a bunch of pictures going through. As Patrick said, we're on 18 acres. We have a family event center, which is kind of our family entertainment center, which we announced this week. Half of that partial, some commercial office, retail and dining. If somewhere between 50 to 100,000 square feet of retail, in addition to the family entertainment, we have 2 hotels and then the multifamily. I'm trying to get to the next part of my slide. This week we had a big week. A company that we have been working with for months, High Five Entertainment out of Austin, Texas, has agreed and signed an LOI to come to Liberty Park. Our whole idea is bringing fun back to Liberty Park. High Five is very much a catalyst to making that happen. We now have a number of restaurants that we're looking for that tenant to come in and move forward on that part. But the whole idea of Liberty Park during the pandemic, after the pandemic, is sort of kind of a paradigm shift in retail. We're going to probably in the next 12 to 24 months, and I'm not trying to steal Brown's thunder, evolve more in retail than we did in the first 70 years. We're going to still see this is a very much a live, work, shop, play environment. It's going to be not your power center, very different type retail center. We're looking at for pent-up demand for things beyond shopping. A lot of times people say, what's type of entertainment? What we're looking for, and we're asking you to bring it to us, and we're bringing people from out of town, is we're going to ask more entertainment. High Five was 45,000 square feet of 90,000 square feet allocated to family entertainment. In addition to that 40, we're going to have a 25,000 square foot outside putt-putt course. We're going to have a number of restaurants. It's very much dining is part of the new retail, fast casual dining restaurants, a real sports bar, a brewery, coffee shops, ice cream shops, fitness users, neighborhood amenity, permanent pop-up shops, some of the offices type users that Daryl and Patrick will bring us from insurance, finance, real estate. Be limited fashion. We'll have bike stores, wireless, art stores. And then a big part of it is the partnership with the universities. The University of Memphis, Christian Brothers University are very much a part and a stakeholder in what's going to happen on the private development site. The hotel user is Capstone Partners out of Washington, D.C. They're going to build the first one, a 100-room hotel, and then a second 100-room hotel. They do not have the flags, but Mr. Jenkins is a great developer based out of Washington, D.C., who I think is going to be very excited to see what happens at Liberty Park. So we're putting all the pieces together. We don't have them all there yet, but retail will thrive in this environment. The market is already there. And with everything that's going to be added with the youth sports complex, bringing 1 million people, the Kroc Center with 300,000 people, Children's Museum with 150,000 people, the demand is already there, and we're kind of excited about it. I will stop there and
yeah, no, that's great. And Patrick, if you could at least unmute or restart your video just for a couple quick questions about fairgrounds, because it's one that people do have lots of questions about. One, I don't know which of you to answer, and this sounds like a simplistic question, but clarify for people the ownership of the project, right? It will. Am I right in saying it will remain city property, but the various entities will have long-term leases for the work they do?
that is correct. And I'll take it, Patrick, and chime in. The city is doing long-term ground leases to some various entities for this property. Obviously, James Macklin is developing everything to the east of Center Court. He's going to have a long-term ground lease for the retail and multifamily section. And then Bender Carey Group is working with a number of family offices that will be invested into the project, and they will become the developer for everything east and for the family entertainment of Center Court.
Okay.
On that part, it's the city's been wonderful to work with, and people are seeing this great possibility of a public partnership.
Two quick questions that people have asked on the site, and I'll go over how people can do that. One was, maybe this, I don't know which of this is for, is, are you doing RFPs for people interested in, somebody asked about food, a food vendor and that sort of thing. Are you at that point?
Yes, we are. We're
Okay.
signing LOIs. We signed this week
Okay.
a national LOI with a ice cream company that I think everybody's going to be excited about.
Right. And last question, and this, I don't think this is in either of your purview, and you'll probably be happy it's not, but I'll ask anyway. Someone asked about parking and a parking structure and parking for Liberty Bowl, not parking for the new retail going in, but mass parking for big events. Is that in either of your, what's going on with that?
It is in our pre.
Okay.
We are providing enough parking with two-story parking structures on both sides of Center Court, kind of interior, that would handle the 18 acres that we're implying.
Okay.
Although one of the reasons that High Five liked the site is 355 days a year, they have plenty of parking in Tiger Lane for them. So.
Okay. Anything more on either of those, Patrick?
Nope, I think
Okay.
Sean hit it.
All right. Then we'll come back to more questions about Liberty Park, but I want to get through just a few questions with each of the presenters, and then we'll do a bigger Q&A at the end. Again, you can ask questions of the speakers on any of their presentations. Just if you're watching on YouTube, there's a chat window, and just put your question in there. If you're watching on the site, just scroll to the bottom of the article, or if you're watching on the homepage, just click on the headline, go to the article, scroll to the bottom. There's a comment section, and you can post a question there, and I will eventually get to it, I promise. Right now, we're going to go to Andy Cates. There he is. Andy Cates from Colliers International, also a sponsor, so thank you for that, Andy. And he'll be talking about the industrial sector, including distribution. So I would think that most of your presentation, Andy, will be that it's just been a disastrous year for all the warehousing in Memphis, and that you are basically hanging on by a thread. Is that a fair assessment?
That's close. That's close. We'll get there.
I'll let you walk through it.
Yeah, so thank you for doing this. And I really appreciate Janice Jenkins for helping out and getting us together as a group of all these folks and professionals. We could not do it without her, and of course with the Daily Memphian. I'm going to share my screen here really quickly, and we'll get started on the presentation. Okay, so here we are. What I really like to do is to let people understand what the overall market is. So apparently, Sean and I have the same problem.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we can't move it.
Just hit your arrow down.
Yeah, it doesn't do it. Oh, here we
There it
go.
goes.
Hey, what do you know? Hey, so really want to give you an update of sort of where the nuts and bolts of the Memphis market is. So we have a total inventory of 261 million square feet. I was looking up the stats for this, and I started at Colliers in 22 years ago in 1998. And the market was 120 million feet then. And so in my career, over 23 years, it's over doubled, which is really fascinating to me. Currently under construction today, we've got 15 million square feet under construction of industrial buildings. Just to kind of give you an idea, I like to think about what's happening nationally too. So currently nationally, there's 329 million square feet of industrial product under construction. We delivered 6.3 million feet up to year to date in the first 3 quarters of the year. If we're not absorbing property from the net positive absorption, we wouldn't be building buildings. And so we keep absorbing warehouses, which is kind of hard to say. We do a lot of our warehouse absorptions at 7.4 million feet now, and I'm certain that it will go up before year end. Our vacancy rate is 6.1%. Nationally, the national vacancy rate right now is 5.6%. And then our asking rates have ranged from 370 to 425. If you're building over 300,000 square feet, you're probably over, in the 370 to 390 range. And if you're under that, you're probably at 4.25. What's really interesting, the national asking net rate, according to CoStar and these things, is $6.40 a foot. It just gives you an idea how affordable Memphis can be for what we're doing in the warehouse world from price perspective. So here's what's happened. Here's some huge transactions that have happened this year. I think what's pretty cool is there's 6 transactions over 700,000 square feet. I'm not going to read all these to you guys and girls, but I think it's really interesting to see some names we recognize and some names we might not recognize that have all done, significant transactions in Memphis. And really, when I say Memphis, I really mean all of the counties around Memphis and our MSA. And you can see sort of the breakdown between new leases per county. Well, when we say Southeast, we mean Southeast Memphis, but we have DeSoto County, Marshall County, and Fayette County. There's a lot of discussion about which county is, which state's pulling one way or another. But if you look at that, that's pretty impressive. It's a pretty good spread across of all of those markets where we're seeing a lot of construction and a lot of deals getting done. But really, there's some big names and some very big buildings. Thinking about what you were talking about, Liberty Park, a football field's 57,000 square feet that they play on. And you can fit 17 football fields inside 1 million square foot building, to give you perspective on size of the stuff we're talking about. So we talk about construction. We've got 15.7 million feet under construction today, and it breaks out speculative and build to suit. We were talking about speculative earlier. That's almost $500 million is being developed speculatively in warehouse in our market. And that's pretty impressive. Those are buildings that are being built by developers with no tenant the day they pull the permit. And they're taking I think they're taking the bet on Memphis. And I think it's really awesome. I mean, that's 500 million feet just speculatively, not counting the build-to-suit projects as well. So that's a pretty significant number. How that breaks out, where that's being developed. Right now in DeSoto County, 6.5 million feet is being developed there. Southeast Memphis, you've got 1.3 million. In Marshall County, you've got 1.2 million. And in Fayette County, Hillwood delivered a 630,000 foot building earlier this year. So we're seeing a bunch of dots on the map that you would expect, but you're seeing some above the state line and below the state line, which is pretty indicative of what we've seen the last several years. Here's usually they tell me to come up with something to talk about what's the trends or what to see going forward. The thing that I think is out of all of this is the proposed construction. Right now, there's 20 projects. It's got 14.5 million feet, or 14.4, I guess, that are still out there. So those are projects that were not talked about on the other slide. These are projects for developers that either taken under contract or have options with the owners where they're proposing to build buildings in the future. So we have a really strong pipeline coming behind what's happening today. So we really need to fill the buildings that are being built, which I feel very confident that will happen because we still have a lot more growth coming in behind it. So the demand is strong, and it's not just Class A buildings. The Class B and C buildings are as full as they've been in my entire career as well. So it's pretty fascinating and, not a terrible time to be in the industrial warehouse business, but I do think it's very, very, very exciting time to see what's happening here. And with that, I am done.
All right.
You take questions.
A couple quick questions, and we'll move on to the next speaker. One question I have about all this construction, and the Amazon one is probably the most obvious on this, but when I moved to Memphis in 1995, not long after you got into this business, and the story was always Memphis was America's distribution center built around FedEx, and that so much of that distribution complex was really serving not so much Memphis, it was a hub and tapping into FedEx and other entities here, and this was a distribution center. How much in this last year, and this might be COVID related, is there more of this sort of Amazon development that is more about, how much of it is about serving Memphis and the surrounding area? How much of any of the new distribution is more about serving the region versus being, quote, America's distribution center? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, not as much as you think. It's more going to be about serving the Southeast region, or from here to Chicago, or from here to Dallas, or from here to Atlanta region. It's not really, I mean, Memphis, well, we got 600,000 people, 650,000 people, and then our MSA is 1.3 million, 1.4 million. Yes, some of these Amazon facilities are servicing our region for sure, but the larger DCs you're seeing are servicing a much larger region due to the ease of getting there, frankly, from the way Memphis is set up. Our congestion is nothing compared to most markets.
Yeah.
I think there was a stat at one point that I'm sure the chamber has that dealt with how many people are here due to FedEx. And I'm telling you what, I wouldn't be talking to you today. I wouldn't have a job.
And that is still is a, because I mean, the whole Amazon FedEx thing sometimes gets a little blown out of proportion. It obviously, I've interviewed Richard Smith from FedEx before, and they get a little, they're not crazy about that debate. They are still, in your business, I assume, this is a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it. FedEx is still incredibly relevant.
Incredibly.
Yeah. What about that? And then last one, I'm going to move on to the next speaker. The rail distribution. I mean, there was a lot of time when that was a huge deal. What do we have? The five major rail, all feed in here. That continues to be, or has that even gotten more important in COVID? Just talk about that real quickly.
So one thing I want to talk about, because COVID does affect what we do a lot, right? But you got to remember, when someone says, hey, I want to build a warehouse in Memphis for a build-to-suit project or a spec project, that before it ever comes to my desk or any of my colleagues' desks, they've been working on it for 18 months. And then it comes to our desk, and because they got to make the plan for it, they got to figure out where they're going to go. They do a transportation study, a logistics study, a labor study. Frankly, they do the labor study first. And then it comes to us, and then we help them figure out where the right real estate is in this market or other markets. And then that takes another 10 to 18 months to get closed and built. So when COVID happened in March, people are like, oh man, warehouse business is going to be crazy. Well, that's only been 9 months, right? So it is a bit of a time lag before we're really going to see the effects of the incredible e-commerce boom, the incredible safety stock that a lot of guys are going to start having. We've heard 5 to 10% of all retailers are going to keep safety stock in place, which
safety stock. What
safety stock? It's kind of is what it is. And if you held 15 SKUs of something, you're going to hold an extra 10%, just because the break in the supply chain that happened in March and how it got everybody all stocked up. I mean, what we heard, there was over 1 billion square foot of demand for safety stock back in April.
Yeah.
So there's a big shift that's coming. I could go on for, I could nerd out about all this stuff. Sorry.
I could too. But I'm going to put you on pause and thank you. And we're going to come back. We've got questions for you about various things you talked about and about industrial. But I'm going to move on to the next speaker for now. And that is Michael Donahoe from Avison Young, talking about the office sector. And there you are, Michael. Thank you. And again, if you're asking questions, if you want to ask questions, if I don't get to them immediately, there'll be a big Q&A at the end. So I'm not skipping over everybody's questions. You can ask on YouTube, and you can ask on the Daily Memphian site. You go to the article in which it's embedded, scroll to the bottom. You do have to be a paid subscriber to post a comment there, post a question, but you should be a paid subscriber anyway. So that's just the way it is. Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you, Eric. And thank you for the Daily Memphian team for putting this together. Unfortunately, my outlook isn't quite as rosy following Andy in the industrial world. Office has had its fair share of issues over the year, and I'll touch on some of those, but I'm an optimist, and I think we'll get past this with the new normal. We will see what that looks like. Let me get up the screen share for you, and we will go from there. Hopefully I don't have a problem moving this along. All right, same problem with Andy. John.
We see it. We can see it there, and there it's going.
Okay, there we go. There we go. I won't bore everyone with the stats on the market fundamentals, but as you can see, it's been a little bit of a decline. Most of that is COVID related. Just to give you a little bit of info, kind of over the past few years, to give you a little bit of perspective, we have seen in 2017, we had a really good year. Absorption was higher than normal due to the delivery of Crosstown, which added 500,000 square feet, most of which was pre-leased, 949 Shady Grove. 2018, not as much absorption, but good leasing activity. A lot of that had to do with a lot of groups consolidating with ServiceMaster, Sedgwick, MAA, et cetera. Still rent growth, still moving in the right direction. 2019 was another great year with lease absorption and leasing activity. Campbell Clinic came to completion. Indigo Ag took 100,000 square feet downtown. And then we hit 2020 when we had to deal with COVID, which was a little bit of an issue, as you could imagine. Even with the FedEx Gibson project coming online, which was 200,000 square feet, that couldn't save us from some of the other issues that we had. We had Medtronic move out 220,000 in the airport submarket. Lucite moved to the East Memphis submarket, which was about a 28,000 square foot negative absorption. Cargill moved from northeast downtown. Those combined are another 100,000 square feet. And normally that's something the Memphis market could overcome, even with a lot of musical chairs. We just have organic growth here. But with COVID, we had a lot of issues, and a lot of that led to my number one trend to watch, which was delayed commitments. I mean, you have FedEx not back in the office yet, Google not back in the office yet, all these groups who were active in the market just not willing to make decisions until they know what everything's going to look like a year from now. And no one can definitively say that unless someone has an absolute hammer that they have to get something done. They're going to push it off. They're going to kick the can down the road. They're going to sign short-term renewals and try to figure out what we're going to look like a year from now. I think we're going to see an evolution in office design. We're going to see more people working from home, but over the past 20 years, we've seen office space get denser and denser, and you're on top of each other, and you have hoteling and sharing desks. And I think there is going to be a move away from that. I mean, people are not going to be sharing desks as much anymore. They're not going to be in 4x4s right on top of each other anymore. Even with more people working from home, I think more people are going to have offices, bigger cubes, more space. My hope is, and maybe I'm an optimist again, but I think this will end up being a net neutral. At least I'll knock on wood and say that. And my last thing, unfortunately, we've just kind of seen rental rates stagnate as more vacancies come back to the market. I think the biggest areas that have seen the issues are our two bigger suburban submarkets, 385 corridor and Northeast. I think we're seeing rental rates go down a little bit there. It's not a huge drop, but they are trending downwards. Poplar is always going to be stable. I don't know if we're going to see the rate growth over the next year until some things are in place, but I don't think Poplar Avenue rents are going to be going down at all. Kind of the summary, it's everyone's optimistic about the vaccine, but until it starts getting tested, manufactured, distributed, knowing when everyone's going to be a part of it, I don't think you're going to see big office users willing to commit to long-term leases until they know what that's going to look like. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to have a company culture. You're not going to be able to train new employees and hire the way you want to unless you have an office presence. I mean, these kids right out of college, they need to be in the thick of it. I guess the question I'll leave you with is, what will the office market look like in a year? And there's so many variables involved in that. I wish I had a perfect answer, but hopefully we will see a vaccine, and hopefully the anxiety of going back into the office will drop, and we'll see more and more people getting back there. And even if it's only 3 days a week, since working from home, some people can do it and some people love it. And people have been moving towards that for a while. But if you can't train your employees right, if you can't have a culture, it's really hard to grow a company. And that is why I think at the end of the day, the office market is not going to go away like many people thought back in March, April.
Yeah. Quick question, or maybe just come back to a point you made. Thank you for that presentation. The distinguishing, I thought just it bears repeating, distinguishing between people's fears, concerns, and uncertainty about the medical aspects of COVID and the economic recession, or the economic hit we're in, right? I mean, so you've got some businesses that are doing really well, right? I mean, there are businesses that are thriving. I mean, I don't know that they're taking advantage of it. So how do you sort of approach that? You've got people and tenants who they're not sure when they want to sign a lease because they're not sure when they really want to have people next to each other. That's a medical consideration. Then you've got some businesses that are thriving, I'm sure, and hiring, but they're not sure how long that's going to last, or distinguish between the two if you could.
Yeah, and it's hard, and it is, and that's why the delayed commitments is a big deal here, because your bigger corporations are not going to commit right now. They're just going to live with what they have. People are going to work from home. But then you've got, for example, a mortgage company whose business is absolutely booming right now with low rates. These guys were probably working in 6x6 cubes 9 months ago, all on top of each other. And they're looking at this and they're saying, listen, we can't have our people in the office right now and it's right next to each other on 6x6 cubes. If we're going to move and transition right now, we're going to have to look at private offices. And maybe in 3 years, that's may not be the best decision, but as of right now, it makes a whole lot of sense for these guys. And they have worked with one personally, and they ended up taking probably twice as much space because of that.
But again, because they wanted to have more distancing and more private offices.
Right. Correct.
Yeah.
They had the luxury of doing that. Not everyone does. It is
fair enough.
It's so crazy to see it out there. It's industry to industry. It's sector to sector. We'll get calls from certain groups, and then other groups where they say we're not making any decisions for 2 years.
Yeah. Okay. We will come back more and to you in the office sector. Thank you for that. And I'm going to move on to our next speaker. But first, let me thank again one of our sponsors today, and a quick message from Colliers International.
Colliers International is a leading diversified professional services and investment management company. With operations in 68 countries, our more than 15,000 enterprising professionals work collaboratively to provide expert advice to maximize the value of property for real estate occupiers, owners, and investors. The Memphis office of Colliers International has had a long-standing reputation as a pioneer in the commercial real estate business for over 70 years. Visit us at colliers.com.
Again, thank you to our sponsor, one of our sponsors, Colliers International. And again, now we'll move on to multifamily. And we have Michael Greenberg from Makowski Ringel Greenberg. I happen to live in Midtown, Michael, and although I don't really go to our office very much, back to the other conversation, but our office is downtown. And everywhere you turn in this city, it seems, at least Midtown, downtown, there are apartments under construction on every corner. So I'm looking forward to your presentation, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions about that when you're done. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. And to the point you just made, it's been a very strange year. If my expectations in March of what the year was going to look like, nothing I would have anticipated is what really probably happened. Let me make sure. Okay, can you see my screen?
Let's see here. I don't see it yet. Is it sharing? Oh, here we go.
Okay.
Yeah, there we are.
And okay, so in our industry, there are probably 3 or 4 different vendors that handle most of the property management or the property management systems across the country. Those 3 or 4 vendors started aggregating their information, which covers about 11.5 million apartments across the United States. And they sent the information. So they sent my information and everybody else that's in the apartment space. And they started, the National Multi-Housing Council started publishing a report shortly after the pandemic began. If they were publishing this report before, I never read it. I never paid attention to it. But each month since the pandemic began, those in our industry have paid a lot of attention to the rent tracker. And what this chart shows, and what you should be paying attention to, is basically of 100 cents on the dollar, how much rent was collected across America. And as the focus should be on the difference in the gap on a month-to-month basis. So as you can see, apartments across the nation have performed essentially as they did in 2019, a point and a half percentage difference than what was collected in rent last year. One interesting note that when I look at the numbers for October, I see the gap widened. And all year I've been wondering, is there a shoe that's about to drop? And I just wonder if the gap widening, and again, it's small numbers, but is the gap widening as a result of various moratoriums? And I'll talk about the moratoriums in just a minute. Continuing on, talking about just how we've done locally, I certainly would not have expected that rents would have risen year over year. I would not have expected vacancy to have fallen year over year, but that's what's happened. My portfolio, but based upon the data from CoStar locally, it's been a remarkable year, not anything anybody would have predicted. In my portfolio, our revenues have been ahead of budget every month since April. So the budgets we prepared last fall, we've outperformed all year. Our occupancy rates are up year over year. One of my greatest surprises is we're about to deliver a building called Madison and McLean, which we will be having our first move-in January 1st, January 2nd. We probably will have 50% of the property leased before we move in the first person. And that's sight unseen. We haven't been able to show, because we don't have a certificate of occupancy, we haven't been able to tour people through the property. So people are leasing sight unseen. I mean, that one statistic has blown my mind. Frankly, just has really surprised me. So while it's been a phenomenal year, some things to point out. What are the headwinds? Because there have been some strange things that have occurred in our industry, maybe different than the other industry sectors. So, for example, the CARES Act. Embedded in the CARES Act was a eviction moratorium. It was somewhat irrelevant locally because the courts were closed at the early part of the pandemic, so you couldn't evict anybody. But if you had a property across the country that was financed with Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, or FHA loans, you were barred from eviction. That moratorium expired in July, and in September, a new moratorium was issued by the CDC. The logic for the moratorium is that if you evict somebody, you are spreading the disease, but the CDC moratorium affects every apartment in the country. So presently, apartment owners cannot evict residents while this moratorium is in effect, and it expires in January. My concern would be that where people have been are unable to pay rent by the time it expires, the mountain that they have to scale will be huge. But that's the environment we're operating in. I think it's noteworthy to point out that locally, Josh Kahane with Glencla Brown and the Daily Memphian had reported on this. I think it was actually yesterday or the day before yesterday. But I have followed this lawsuit. We're not involved. But apparently the case that Josh filed is the only case left nationally. And basically the basis of the case is that the CDC moratorium is unconstitutional and it has denied property owners their rights. In my opinion, the eviction moratoriums are probably not the right medicine. In my opinion, programs like the eviction settlement program, which is being administered, I think by NPI, Steve Barlow, Paul Young, they have essentially put together a fund, and what they're doing is they're negotiating with landlords on behalf of tenants to do workouts where people need the help. In my opinion, far better public policy because it puts the dollars really where it's needed, as opposed to necessarily some sort of blanket program. Other headwinds, we have a reappraisal that's going to occur in 2021, which will dramatically impact our operating costs, because in the prior 3 years until the next reappraisal, apartments have sold at very low cap rates. So they've been rising values. Insurance costs, every year we renew our insurance. Our insurance costs have doubled or tripled over the last couple of years. Labor costs are rising. You make the point, everywhere you go, you see apartments under construction. That concerns me. CoStar is forecasting vacancy rates climbing as new units come online. Construction costs have risen dramatically. We've had supply chain challenges. Trying to get appliances for the last couple of months has been very difficult. So some parting comments, just, my opinions or things that I've been questioning. It seems to me that the pandemic will be looked back as the great accelerator of things that maybe were already happening, whether it's in retail or other sectors. The pandemic maybe accelerated things that were otherwise happening. And another curious observation to me will be what will happen in secondary and tertiary markets. Will places like Memphis stand to benefit in the long run, maybe at the expenses of places like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, as we've learned to be able to work remotely? Do people necessarily have to live and work in the same city? And do they necessarily have to live in the most expensive cities in the country? And will they start to migrate to less expensive places which are less dense? I don't know, just a curious question to me. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Eric.
That's great. Thank you. I have approximately 1,000 questions for you. I won't ask all of them. I will make a comment, and it relates to multifamily, that my son now is a software programmer, graduated this fall. We should all be programmers. If everyone with kids, make your kids be programmers. It's unbelievable, the demand for them. But he is working from home in an apartment in LA that is unbelievably expensive. Thankfully, he's paying for it himself. And he's going to come home for a month. He's going to get tested, and we're going to be quarantined, and we're going to do everything right. But he's going to come home for a month just because he's kind of bored in being in his apartment. And I do think that, and he could live in Memphis for a whole lot, probably half the price of LA, and still be effective in his job. So I think it's an interesting dynamic. A question for you, though, is on the moratoriums, there's another part of that, and I don't mean this callously, but there are lenders behind at some level. You mentioned, there are private lenders behind all these projects. At a certain point, how much pressure do they feel? And at what point do they start to scream that they aren't able, they're not getting paid, or that the kind of cycle breaks down, right? Because enough people aren't paying money. Are we close to that? Or are we a long ways from that with multifamily?
Obviously, locally, things have performed fairly well. Within our portfolio, I've been surprised how well. That's not necessarily the case in New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Some of the other cities have relatively high, I don't know if they have high vacancy rates, but just to your point, people have vacated. An anecdotal observation, I have a son who works on Wall Street, and he fled New York early on, came to Memphis. He was working upstairs in our home. He was here for like 11 weeks. He quit a job, interviewed, took another job, all from upstairs in my house. But what it proved, that he had a cousin who's a lawyer practicing in New York who was roaming around the country. What it's proven is the point you were just trying to make, that maybe you don't have to live in the marquee cities. Now, to specific your question about lenders, I think that's the basis to some extent of even Josh's lawsuit and the question about the constitutionality of these eviction moratoriums. It's a continuum, right? If residents don't, I'm a big bad landlord because if you don't pay me my rent, I want to evict you. Yeah, so I'm a terrible person for doing that. But if you don't pay rent and therefore I can't make my mortgage payments, and I stop making my mortgage payments, what does that do to the insurance companies that have lent us the money, or other financial services companies that are, it's a continuum. So,
Right.
Surely the lender set is closely monitoring payments and closely monitoring these moratoriums, because they need to be concerned if they start to see a trend in a different direction.
To that end, and you were talking about the vacancy rates and all that. I mean, are you seeing money not being so available for new multifamily projects? And we'll focus locally, or are we not there yet?
I don't want to speak out of school, but when I talk to some of my local construction lenders, I'm not in the market trying to borrow construction financing right now. The projects that we've got under construction were capitalized before the pandemic. And when I do talk to some of my friends that are construction lenders, they do tell me that the banks are a little bit more nervous, and they're being a little bit more selective, and maybe they're lending a little bit less so. So, that may be a constraining factor going forward. I think, it's prudent for the banks to have taken a position. Well, we're not quite sure what's going to happen here, so maybe we need to stick a little bit tighter. But I think that would be a better question asked of the banker set.
Yeah, no, fair point and fair response. I appreciate that. I've got more questions for you, but we'll move on to our next speaker. Thank you, Michael. And
Thank you.
I will bring in Brown Gill from Gill Properties to talk about retail. Before we get Brown going here, I'll remind everyone you can ask questions. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a chat window, and just post a question there. I will get to it eventually. Or if you're watching on the site, just make sure you go to the article in which this video is embedded. You click on the headline. If you're watching on the homepage, just go down to the bottom of the article. There's a comment section, and you can put a question there. Brown, you do not have you don't have a fancy presentation that we have to struggle with today. So we love that. Normally we love the visuals, but we're good today. So I'll just let you talk it through, and I'll probably have some questions for you.
I'd like to start by saying thank you for having me. And we love the Daily Memphian.
Well, thank you.
I think living in a town where a paper was created by Memphians and the much less funny Andy Cates it just feels exciting, and you should all be applauded for the creation.
I have to come back and enjoy that one. That was good, because I do know he is watching right now, the other Andy Cates, who happens to be the board chair and a friend. He can't say anything right now. And anyone who knows Andy knows he's so frustrated right now because he can't say anything.
Yes, he is. Very frustrated. A lot less funny than the Andy Cates we have on the line here. And y'all should all be applauded for the work that y'all did to create the Daily Memphian. We are huge supporters. All right, retail in Memphis, but let's start more broadly. Memphis is a tertiary market in virtually every product type other than industrial. We're a primary market in industrial. And I think the much funnier Andy Cates would agree with me. But overall, retail, office, our self-storage business that we're in, we compared to other cities, we are not looked at the same level as major cities in the United States. And most people are aware of that. So I think that's important to know. Good retail, too, is a symptom of solid, dense growth. So I don't think that I think that retail should be it should be the last use that comes after you have great housing, you've got great office developments, and office users moving to your house. To me, retail is a symptom of great growth. And I think what Michael Greenberg said was so spot on. The great accelerator is, to me, it's definitely, I think, what we've seen in the retail market through COVID. COVID has the companies, the retailers that were in trouble pre-COVID are now really in trouble, or they've already gone out of business, or they're about to go out of business. I think a good example of that is Macy's. They were struggling prior to COVID. They've hired a development team in-house to try to start redeveloping 80 concrete bunkers that they have around the country. And now it looks like they could go the way of Sears and be a truly corporately rated, and their sites redeveloped. Today, retail is all about convenience. And so what you'll see during COVID and after COVID is you'll see these pockets of well-designed retail. We see it now at Poplar and Perkins, Poplar and Mendenhall, Poplar and White Station, Poplar and Germantown Parkway in Germantown. We see pockets in Midtown and small pockets in downtown. Overall, we have too much retail in Shelby County, but well-located retail will lease and continue to adapt through COVID. So you're going to lose some. There will definitely be some vacancy that we've already started to see. But I think well-located buildings do tend to evolve with time until they're redeveloped. So pre-COVID, we leased to roughly 5 different product types. Service users, which were like nail, hair salons, massage, dry cleaning, medical. So you have hearing aid, dental. You've seen St. Francis and Baptist all break out their own retail medical use. Restaurant, which we've seen probably the most affected of any of the retailers through COVID, and we all know why. Some office retail, which I think COVID could actually bring some more office users to retail. People that don't want to be in a multi-tenant building, have to ride in an elevator, have to struggle with parking. They want to drive right up to their front door. They want to be able to walk right into a 1-story building. They want to control their own HVAC system and not share that with any other tenants. So I think we could see users coming out of multi-tenant office and maybe coming over to retail buildings if they want to pay that same rate. And then lastly, fitness. Fitness has also been somewhat affected. I go to a lot of different fitness facilities in Memphis, and I think they've all tried to adapt well to the restrictions. I also just wanted to point out before I stop talking, there've been a lot of retailers that are actually killing it during COVID. They're doing better, not worse. Obviously, grocery and drug, Costco and Sam's have absolutely done better than they did last year. Lululemon, Apple hasn't even had a store open. They're still selling products online. But that's a sense where you still wanted to go to the store to fix your computer. So there's a service component to that. And then the QSRs, Tops Barbecue, Five Guys, I've heard from both of those guys and I've seen their numbers. They're doing sales much higher than they were, like double digit higher than they were this time last year. And they have month over month post-April. March and April were tough months, but then everything past April have been extremely good months for them. The last little thing I'll say is that we've seen some internet-based only retailers now wanting to do brick and mortar. So fortunately, we have a new project on White Station. It's a retail project. And, we did start it in March. We started it post-pandemic. However, the retailers that we're talking to now, I'm not saying that they're not COVID proof, but they're definitely COVID proven. They're used to the environment and they're ready to commit for a 5 or 10 year lease in a new building. So that's all. That's my presentation. No slides.
Thank you. No, that's great. Thank you. I had a bunch of questions for you too, and we'll get to them. The one before we do a break and get everybody on here, I'll ask. I mean, it is a good reminder, I think, because again, we've been doing this seminar. We write a lot about commercial real estate. That that the headwinds against certain types of retail. I mean, Macy's, they've been up against it for quite some time. But I mean, people lose track of the number of vacant malls. Isn't it something like 20 plus, even 30% of the malls in America were vacant pre-COVID? There were huge headwinds against that. And obviously on Poplar and Highland, the conversion of not a mall, but, Petco, the conversion of that retail space. Do you into some apartments and still some retail, but smaller footprint for retail? Do you see more conversions happening in that just being accelerated? Because you look at some of these big shopping centers, it's a massive amount of land, massive parking lots, sometimes in really incredibly valuable locations.
Right. So you brought up two different product types. The interior mall, I think in the Southeast, places where the weather is genuinely nice most of the year, it's probably dead, in my opinion. The interior mall. So let's talk about Oak Court Mall, Wolf Chase. They just aren't. That's not where we all go to shop. We tend to want convenience over any other factor. We want to live close to where our kids go to school, where we work, and where we shop. We want to be able to cross the street and go to yoga, get something to eat, go to guitar lessons. We want to do that as close as possible to our house. So really, it's all about convenience. So you brought up the interior mall. It's always been set out, lots of parking. You got to walk into a large structure. I think that in the Southeast, it's continued to not be able to keep up with the times. What happened on Highland that Millhouse did was a great development. Some of those retailers did struggle and are pre-COVID not doing fantastic. So I think that product is still developing. I think what Loeb did down the street and the redevelopment that he did on that Bob and Lou did on Highland was a great redevelopment. I think they found good, solid restaurant tenants there to serve the U of M market.
All right, I've got more questions for you, but I'm going to bring everyone in. Before we do that, though, I will actually go ahead and turn I guess, where is Peter? Peter can take care of this. We do have one last sponsor, not last but not least, which is Trustmark Bank. So we'll get a quick message from them, and then we'll come back with a full Q&A with everyone. Again, you can put your questions in the chat on the YouTube channel, or scroll to the bottom of the article in which this video is embedded on the Daily Memphian site, and you will be able to post a comment there that I will get to. So message from our sponsor, Trustmark Bank.
Trustmark is committed to making home mortgages easier. And with the help of our friendly mortgage loan officers, the only things you have to think about are the memories you're going to make. How will you leave your mark? Get started at trustmark.com/mortgage.
Flexible business solutions delivered. That's Trustmark's cash management services. From accepting more forms of payment and depositing checks remotely to automating accounts receivable and payable, we're here with tools to help. How will you leave your mark? Learn more at trustmark.com/business.
All right. Again, thank you to Trustmark Bank. Thanks to Colliers International, and thanks to Evans Petrie, all for sponsoring the event today. I have to note that I'm fine. I'm healthy, but I look like I have a college level hangover right now because something has gone totally haywire with the color of my camera. So for those of you who are worried that I'm dying, I am not. Thankfully, I'm quite healthy. Thank you all for your presentations, and we'll do just a bit of question and answer here until we get tired of each other. And one question that probably someone alluded to, I think Michael Greenberg did, but I'm curious, I'll go to Andy on this, just the state of the construction industry in terms of the ability to get materials. I mean, you're obviously industrial warehousing is doing a ton of work right now. How hard is it to get enough labor and enough materials at a reasonable price? What's the market like?
So it's a good question. It's a lot of these developers that are in Memphis are not boutique developers. These are some big players from around the country, and their buying power is a lot different than Andy and Eric Construction.com. They really have significant buying power. Most of the developers have their own construction company inside their under their purview. So those guys are struggling when it comes to having enough qualified people to manage all the jobs. They're having a hard time finding labor for that. And then I think down to the subcontractors, they're having a hard time finding labor as well. And it's really not indicative of just Memphis. I think that's everywhere. I'm on calls with folks in St. Louis and other cities, and they're saying the same thing, that the demand is there. The construction pricing is kind of, it's ticked up some, but it continues to tick up. I mean, Michael can speak to that. Brown can speak to that. All these guys can about construction pricing. It's going to tick up some every year. But for the most part, these guys that are these huge developers have pretty significant buying power to demand what they're trying to do.
This is a question I guess really I could give to each of you, but I'll go back what would, from the federal government right now, there's conversation with the federal government maybe doing another round of stimulus and, a kind of another CARES Act. Going to, who shall I pick? I'll go to Patrick. What from your seat, in retail, in commercial real estate generally, but from a retail point of view, what would you like to see in a next package from the federal government, if anything? And you may say nothing.
I don't know that I can necessarily speak to retail, but obviously there are those that are hurting and have not weathered the this pandemic as well as others, and I think there is a need for stimulus, and probably sooner rather than later.
How much help was for tenants of yours? I mean, obviously the PPP loans, the paycheck protection loans, paycheck protection loans that were done in the summer. A lot of small businesses got those. Full disclosure, the Daily Memphian got one, and I know just anecdotally. I mean, there are instances of abuse that have been highlighted, and that's appropriate. But overwhelmingly, what I've heard is it helped people immensely. And a part of that money was to go to rent. Would you want to see another? I mean, did you experience that, Patrick, that tenants of yours were very much helped by that? And I assume another round of PPP would be welcome.
Sure, they were very much helped by that. What I would say, again, my focus is primarily office. And I think early on, there was definitely a disconnect between office tenants and landlords. We did receive, several requests for rent relief. And I think on the retail side, the lenders were, they were quicker to offer relief to the owner, which was then passed on to the tenant. From the office side, most office lenders were not providing any relief to the office owner, and therefore the office owner was having to, keep the tenant, request tenants, you've got to keep paying. I know you're not occupying or utilizing your office space, but we've got a mortgage to make. And so I think early on there was a disconnect probably between kind of the, where we were with the lenders and kind of where we were with our tenants. But I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah. Brown, I'll go to you because I saw you nodding. I mean, the dynamic of the PPP, at least being very much a part of it, was paychecks, but it was also rent. That was a huge help, or your take on it?
I think it helped some of our tenants, but it was such it only extended for 2.5 months. You could only use that money for specific things. I feel like I wish some of our tenants, specifically restaurant tenants, could have a more directed assistance to get them through this gap. Because I do feel that once a vaccine comes out, I do feel like we will go out and eat in restaurants again. I think we're all tired of eating at home or doing takeout or eating in my car. I eat in my car more than I ever have in my life. I've used the kitchen here more than I ever have. I think we all want to eat in a place again. And I think restaurant tenants, specifically, I'm not really talking about drive-through QSRs. I'm really speaking to full service, walk-in, sit down. And I'd like to see assistance specific to the industries that have been the most affected. So yes, I'm not complaining about PPP. Gilt Properties got some PPP money. It was great. Some of our tenants did. We worked with all our tenants, but I feel like they could do more for the short term.
Yeah. This is an awkward question, but I'll ask it anyway. I mean, I'll go to Michael. Why not? I'm just going to pick on Michael Donahoe this time because I haven't involved you. There was we talked about the eviction moratorium on the multifamily side, and obviously there's an eviction moratorium on single family homes, which we're not talking about today. But how many deals were made, not by you, of course, but how many deals were made generally with tenants who said, look, I gotta, I'll keep paying something on rent, but until we get through this, I can't pay 100%. I mean, we just can't. How much of that kind of went on?
It was a surprisingly very small percentage. And I think a lot of that had to do with the PPP. Okay. Because before we do anything, we say, hey, we'll work with you. We want to be good stewards. We want to be good landlords. But send us your financials. We want the full story. And if someone got a lot of times they would send it over, ask what we could do. Then they'd say the PPP money came in. We could make it a little bit longer till things normalize. And like I said, I can probably count on one hand where we had to give real rent deferment or abatement to get through this. And I will tell you, it would have been a heck of a lot more if it wasn't for the PPP loans.
Yeah. For people who didn't comment on it, I'm curious how the future, and I'll stay with you, Michael Donahoe, mixed use. I mean, is that one of those things that won't go away? I'm not suggesting it would go away post-COVID, but how much might that change? Because that's been all the rage, right? For the last 10 years. I mean, if you saw a presentation like this, or you read a kind of, I don't want to pick on the media, but kind of a glorified article about what was going on in real estate, it was all about mixed use, right? How much does that change post-COVID?
And I'm a little bit of an optimist, and I live in a place where I can walk to all the places I want to go, and I like having multiple things in multiple places. That's just me personally, but I don't think we're going to see a big departure from that. I think we are going to get to a new normal. I think office is going to have some changes. I think retail is going to have some changes, but I think mixed use is still going to be a thing, and I still think it has momentum. Maybe it's not as hot and much of a buzzword as it was a year ago, but I think by 2022, people are going to be back on that train. I know that Sean and Michael Greenberg and Brown have dealt with a lot more mixed use projects over the years. I'm curious to know their thoughts as well.
Yeah, let's go to Sean. Are you there?
Your
thoughts
here.
on that?
There's going to be change. I still think mixed use is still where we're going, but there's going to be some changes that take place in mixed use projects. Even like I'm going to go back to the Liberty Park. We have made some changes to our design because of COVID. We made sidewalks bigger. We made curbside pickup for restaurants that are in mixed use projects where it's not a standard place. Outdoor gathering areas are larger. We're out more dining. A lot of those changes took place between March and now when we go into construction. So I don't think it's going away. There are some people that will see some changes in mixed use projects be a little different. I mean, the Lake District is a wide open mixed use project. Crosstown Concourse got a little hurt from its retail because it's so condensed. There's something in between.
Yeah. Brown, I'll go back to you for a second. I think you touched on this on some of the areas of retail that are doing really well during this COVID time. But do you see, and you can just tell me I'm completely making this up, but post-COVID, maybe now, but certainly post-COVID, is there going to be, here's an example. Stock and Bell, which is a small, I hate to give a shout out to one specific business, but here's a business that's kind of a sort of medium high end. They do housewares, they do clothing, very local, very kind of unique feel to it. They opened a location. They have a location downtown. They opened a location in Overton Square in the middle of COVID. My mind was blown. Full disclosure, I like that store, but is there going to be more of that sort of truly local? In the same way people really like local restaurants, very local, very of the place restaurants, will that sort of retail, you think, come out of this on the other side where we can buy all our toilet paper on Amazon and kind of generic things online and truly unique things at local stores?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about home goods too. Home goods have just been killing. Everyone's sitting at home thinking about all the stuff they want to do to their house. Contractors are busy. I couldn't get a fence built for 6 months. We couldn't get cedar. Yes, I think that we have seen local and regional and national users. Some have thrived during COVID, and that's a great example of a great user that is doing wonderfully through COVID and will continue to later. I think what Michael Greenberg called the great accelerator is, to me, the best way that encapsulates what COVID will be to our respective industries and markets in a good and bad way.
Yeah.
I know, Eric,
Sean.
there are other retailers that have opened. Cheryl Pesky at Laurelwood opened in COVID. Tawanda Pirtle opened her boutique on South Main. There's opportunistic people that see into the site. So,
A question I had for you, Michael Greenberg, about multifamily. One of the strange things about this economic disruption has been certain things doing really well, certain things doing really badly. One of the things that's done really well is single family homes, home prices, all of that. Has that had Memphis is still by national standards, a modestly priced home market, but prices are going up. Does that help your business? I mean, is that driving more people to apartments right now, given how expensive homes are getting?
I don't know that we've seen an impact. My guess is you get to a point if home prices are climbing dramatically that it will impact us. When home prices are low, in other economic cycles, we saw lots of people, leaving rental to buy a home. In some cases, we would see people who were bad credit that weren't paying their rent were buying homes, but that was a whole different economic cycle. It stands to your assumption stands to reason that it will have that there should be an effect, but I don't think we've seen it yet. Yeah. Yet we have seen in the last year over year, I think home prices have spiked up pretty dramatically. Maybe one of the best years in terms of price appreciation in the last many.
I'm going to go to you, Andy. You've done these seminars with us back to the Daily News many years ago, which I always appreciate. I think you've even been on Behind the Headlines once or twice. I always ask you this question, which is when it comes to distribution, and you had your map up and the amount of construction and new development that's going on, some people watching will fixate on how many of those properties are being built below the state line or in Marshall County, in DeSoto County. Will that dynamic change? And is that dynamic as bad as some people think it is?
No, it really isn't. I mean, the dynamic between the counties, we are such an MSA. I always tell people this: go to the parking lot, look at the license plates. 50% of license plates are going to say Tennessee, 50% are going to say Mississippi, no matter which side of the state line you're on. We are such a market where people are driving into that you'll see people from different sides of the state line. People have there was definitely a big push in Mississippi for several years, but now you've got groups like TPA who have decided, Homes and Airways, that they're going to build a 1 million-foot spec building. And Robinson Weeks is now onto their second building in Shelby County. Amazon's obviously doing a bunch of stuff in Shelby County. So you're seeing things happen in Shelby County. Now, one of the things I was going to talk about on my slide was like, oh my God, are we out of land? No, we're not out of land. There are definitely less land for development than there used to be, but there's still probably 10 to 15 years left of industrial land in this MSA area for sure that can be developed, if not more. And then, there's plenty of malls that we can turn into warehouses at some point too, because we've got to repurpose those as well.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'm going to wrap things up unless there's anything anybody else wants to get in or ask of each other. I think I've gotten to most, if not all, the questions I could get to on the site. All right. If we're good. I do want to say that, Sean, it finally struck me. I think your background, it looks like a really cool, like late 80s album cover. It's like the band Lease, the album name Memphis Fairgrounds. I couldn't figure out what it was, and then I finally figured out what it was. Thank you all for being here and putting up with me, among other things. Thank you to our sponsors. We appreciate it immensely. If you missed any of this, the full video will be on the Daily Memphian site or on our YouTube channel. It'll probably take an hour or two to process, but you can watch the whole thing again and again and again. But we do appreciate you watching. Thanks, Trustmark Bank, Evans Peachtree, Colliers International. Our next seminar, I'm sure virtually, will be Women in Business in February. Past seminars have covered development, including a couple of the projects we talked about today. Those are on the Daily Memphian site. And we did a small business seminar a couple months ago, including talking to a food business and a fitness business and just small business owners and how they've dealt with the pandemic. So check those out if you liked this. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank all our panelists, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.